Welcome to our series on Rambam's Hilchot Talmud Torah. We're now going to start the 5th chapter, and we dedicate this episode in loving memory of Levi ben Moshe Esther and Elisheva Yal bat Levi, and also in memory of Rabbi Mori, Rabbi Roni Salach ben Avram Ezra. And I'm going to hand you over to Michael.
Thank you, Rabbi Kalati. So we're up to chapter 5, Hilchot Talmud Torah, and this chapter deals with the honor due to one's teacher. As you know, just as before we start, we have to understand. In this chapter, it's quite strong. Rambam is very forceful in his in all respects of respect for a teacher to quite a severe degree. When I was learning it, I was quite surprised at how. At some we'll go through it and we'll learn it, but we have to understand that education is the foundation of society and how people will develop. I think when we look back at our formative years, I think every single person listening can relate to the respect that he or she has for a teacher he has had in his life, or he or she had in his life, whether in grammar, high school, or in prep school. Yeah. I know that I can recount teachers that I owe an incredible debt to, and I regard them, in some ways, as almost like a member of the family. How much they've been meant. So this makes respect and honor of a teacher is very important. So let's start. Halacha Aleph. Geshem she'odom mitzuveh b'chvod aviv v'yira'ato, just as a person is commanded to honor his father and hold him in awe, kach hu chayav b'chvod rabbo, so too is he obligated to honor his teacher and hold him in awe. V'yira'ato yoter me'aviv, and indeed the measure of honor and awe due to one's teacher exceeds that due to his father. She'aviv meveu l'chayol mazeh, because his father brings him into the life of this world. For Rabbo, and his teacher, shelamdo chachma, who teaches him wisdom, mevi'o l'chay olam haba, brings him into the life of the world to come. So the teacher, Rambam is explaining here, the teacher prepares, the parent brings the child into the earth and prepares him to deal with worldly considerations, but his teacher will open the doors of something beyond the world. And Rambam continues, Ra'a avedas aviv ve'avedas rabbo. Accordingly, if he saw a lost object belonging to his father and one belonging to his teacher, Shel Rabbo kodemet l'shem aviv. The lost object belonging to his teacher takes precedence. Aviv Rabbo nosim b'mesa b'niach et shel Rabbo. If his father and his teacher are both carrying loads, he should relieve his teacher's loads. Ve'achakach shel aviv, and after, then his father's load. Aviv Rabbo shavuim b'shva. If his father and his teacher are held as captives, podeh et Rabbo, he should redeem his teacher. Ve'achakach podeh es aviv, and afterwards redeem his father. Ve'im haya aviv talmid chacham, podeh et aviv tchila. However, if his father is also a Torah scholar, he should redeem his father first. So probably wise to make yourself a talmid chacham if you're having children, in case you come into this situation.
Yeah, you can
save your skin.
Master of two crowns.
V'chein im haya aviv talmid chacham. Similarly, if his father is a Torah scholar, afal pi she'eno shokul keneged rabbo, even if he is not equivalent to his teacher, meishiv evadoso, he should return the lost article, ve'achakach meishiv avedas rabbo, and then that belonging to his teacher. Rambam continues, Ve'ein lecha kavod gadol mikavod harav. There is no greater honor than due a teacher. V'lo mora mamora harav, and no greater awe than is a Jew a teacher. Amru Chachamim, our sages have declared, Mora Rabcha Kumora Shamayim, your fear of your teacher should be equivalent to your fear of heaven. Lefichach Amru, therefore they said, Kol Hacholek al Rabbo, whoever disputes the authority of his teacher, Gacholek al Hashchina, it's as if he revolts against the divine presence. Shneimah, as it is stated in Numbers 26:9, Bahatzotam al Hashem, he who led a revolt against gods. And this verse describes Korach's revolt. Although obviously Korach's revolt was directed against Moshe, the Torah considers it as if it's directed against God himself. And further, Rambam continues, V'chol ha'oseh meriva al rabo ka'oseh meriva im hashchina. Whoever complains against his, whoever engages in controversy with his teacher is as if he engaged in controversy with the Shekhinah, the divine presence. As it is implied in also Numbers 20:13, Asher Rabu B'nei Yisrael et Hashem vayikadesh bam, where the Jews contested with God and where God was sanctified. This refers to when the Jews complained because of the lack of water and they started quarreling in the desert and they started quarreling with Moshe. Again, God interpreted this as a revolt against him when they were revolting against, when they made their complaints against Moshe. And Rambam continues, V'chol hamitra'em al Rabbo, whoever complains against his teacher, kamitra'em al Hashem, is as if he complains against Hashem. Shneimah, as it is stated in Exodus 16:8, Lo aleinu talnosechem ki al Hashem. Your complaints are not against us, but against God. So this complaint that I've just mentioned was when the Jews complained against Moshe and Aaron because of a lack of food. Moshe gave them that previous reply. On that particular pasuk, the Mechilta comments, and I quote, whoever speaks against the shepherds of the Jewish people is considered as if he spoke against God. And Rambam continues, V'chol ham harhe achar rabo, whoever thinks disparagingly against of his teacher, ke'ilu kamaharhe achar shechina, it's as if he thought disparagingly of Hashem or Shekhinah. Shneimah, as it is stated in Numbers 21:5, Vaydaber ha'am ba'Elokim u'v'Moshe, and the people spoke out against God and Moses. Halacha 2. Ezahu cholek al Rabbo. What is meant by disputing the authority of one's teacher? Zeh shekovea lo midrash v'yoshev v'doresh u'melamed shelo b'rishus Rabbo. A person who establishes a house of study where he sits, explains and teaches without the permission of his teacher. So what can we say about this? The Yoreh Yodea, the Shulchan Aruch, explains that the prohibition applies only to rendering halachic decisions on matters directly related to practice. There is no difficulty involved in teaching on a merely theoretical level. However, it is not clear whether the Rambam would accept this view. The Rishon LeZion explains that this prohibition applies even to establishing a house of study under one's own direction, even though one does not render any halachic decisions. So, so Rambam continues. Rabo kayam v'yafal pi she'rabo b'mdina acheret, and this applies in his teacher's lifetime, and also applies when his teacher is in another country. So, interesting that one is not allowed to set up competitive houses of study that will perhaps give rulings on halacha or give advice on halacha in his teacher's lifetime or even when the teacher is in another country. And Rambam continues, "Ve'asur la'adam lahorot mifnei rabo le'olam." It is forbidden to ever render a halachic judgment in one's teacher's presence. V'chol hamoreh halacha b'fnei rabo chayav mita. Whoever renders a halachic judgment in his teacher's presence is liable for death at the hand of heaven. So, it must be, you have to show your rabbi who taught you respect, and don't try and render halachic judgments in front of him, as the consequences will be severe. Halakha 3. Haya veno uven rabo shnem asa mil. V'sha'al lo adam davar halacha. If a person asks a student regarding a halachic question, and there are 12 mil. Now, I understand 1 mil is 2,000 cubits, which is approximately, in modern measurements, 1 kilometer. That 2,000 cubits was the distance derived from the measurement of the camp of Israel as they journeyed through the desert. So, if a person asks a student regarding a halachic question, and there are 12 mil between him and his teacher, mutar lahoshiv, he is permitted to answer. Olafrish min ha'isur, afilu b'fnei rabo. Furthermore, to prevent a transgression, it is permitted to give a halachic judgment even in the presence of one's teacher. Mutar lahorot. What does the previous statement imply? Keitzad, for example, kagon shera'a adam oseh davar ha'asur mipnei shelo yada be'isoro. When one sees a person perform a forbidden act because he was unaware of the prohibition, and it was important that he interceded, or mipnei risho, or because of his perversity, yesh lo lahafrisho or lomar lo davar ze asur. He should try to prevent him by telling him this is forbidden. Va'afilu b'fnei rabbo, and even this applies even in his teacher's presence. V'afal pi shelo natan lo rabot reshut, and even though one's teacher had not given him permission, shekol makom sheyesh chilul Hashem en cholkim kavod larav. Wherever the desecration of God's name is involved, no deference is paid to the teacher's honor, and this derives from Proverbs 21:30, and I quote, "There is no wisdom, no understanding, and no counsel against God." End quote. The teacher's honor stems from the honor of the Torah and in the honor of God. Hence, in all cases, priority is given to the Torah. Rambam continues, "Bameh dvarim amurim." When does the previous statement apply? B'davar shenikra mikra, with regard to matter that came up incidentally. However, establishing oneself as a halachic authority to sit, or liyoshev, or lahorot chol shoel, afilu hu b'sof ha'olam v'rabo v'sof ha'olam asur lo lahorot. When establishing oneself as a halachic authority to sit and reply to all who ask concerning halachic matters is forbidden, even if the student is at one end of the world and the teacher at the other end of the world. Ad sheyamut rabo, until the teacher dies, or elo imkein natal reshut merabo, or the student receives permission from his teacher to give halachic responses. V'lo kol mi shemet rabo mutar lo leishev lahorot b'Torah. Not everyone whose teachers dies is permitted to sit and render judgment concerning the Torah law. Elo imkein haya talmid shehegia la'ara'ah. Only one who is a student worthy of rendering judgment. Halacha Daled 4. V'chol talmid shelo higia lahara'a umara harei ze rasha shote v'gas haruach. Any student who is not worthy of rendering halachic judgments and does so is foolish, wicked, and arrogant. V'alav namar, and of these it is stated in Proverbs 7:26, Ki rabim chalalim hapilah, she has cast down many corpses, applies to him. There's a very interesting statement. What does this mean? Someone who renders halachic judgments, who's not worthy of them, Rambam is quoting King Solomon. He has cast down many corpses. This refers to. This is because the concept can be derived from the word Hafilah, cast down, is related to Nafal, a stillborn baby. This is
Nefel.
quoted from the. This is Nefel. This is quoted from Kesef Mishneh. It's interesting. It's like a premature birth that has gone bad. This is someone rendering. It's like when you speak and you don't speak what you're prepared to deliver. It's like a stillborn baby being delivered. It's something that has not been not come out
thought out properly.
Yeah, exactly. V'chein chacham she'egia la'ra'a ve'eno moreh harei zeh monei Torah. Conversely, a sage who is worthy of rendering halachic judgments and refrains from doing so and holds back the spread of Torah, v'noten michsholot lifnei ha'ovrim, and places stumbling blocks before the blind. V'alav na'amar. Of these it is stated, va'atzumim kol harugeha. How prodigious are those she slew. This quote applies to him. This is also from Proverbs. I think it's also 7:26. And this atzumim, the atzumim, prodigious, is related to the word otzem, meaning to close one's eyes. This is according to the Kesef Mishnah. Elu hatalmidim haktanim, these underdeveloped students, shelo hirbu Torah kir'u, who have not gathered much Torah knowledge, vehem mevakshim lihitgadel b'fnei amei haaretz uven anshei iram, who seek to gain prestige in the eyes of the common people and the inhabitants of their city. V'koftzin v'yoshvin v'rosh ladin v'lchorat v'Yisrael. They spread division. They jump to sit at the head of all questions of law and halachic judgments in Israel. Hem hamarbeim hamachlokes. They spread division. Hem mecharivin et haolam. They destroy the world. V'ham chabim neira shel Torah. And they extinguish the light of the Torah. Very heavy word. V'ham chalblim kerem Hashem tzvaot. And they wreak havoc in the vineyard of the God of hosts. Aleihem omar Shlomo b'chachmato. Of these, King Solomon alluded to them in his wisdom. Achezu lanu she'ulim ketanim v'chablim karamim. Take for us foxes, little foxes that spoil the vineyards when our vineyards are blooming. So very stern words about people who are not prepared or not are not versed, qualified, and think they're qualified and want to make a name for themselves by trying to prematurely sit in judgment, and they're not. This is a very, very strong word. So why is this so? Apparently, at the time of the Rambam, there was a slew of underdeveloped students who were trying to make a name for themselves, and it was a prevalent problem at the time of students or people who were not fit to give judgment, were in a position to give judgment, and things were not being done correctly. And I think, yes, it says, the Kesef Mishnah notes that although the Mishneh Torah was composed as a timeless book of halacha, the Rambam's harsh criticism here may have resulted from the prevalence of unqualified students who sought rabbinical positions in his time. Halacha Hey 5. Ve'asur lo letalmid likrot l'rabo mishmo. It is forbidden for a student to refer to his teacher by name, va'afilu shelo b'fonov, even outside of his presence. For who sheyihi Hashem pel'i shekol hashomer yodea shehu ploni v'lo yazkir shemo b'fonov v'afilu likrot la'achirim k'shemamam k'shem rabo. He should not mention his name in his presence, even when referring to others with the same name as his teacher, as he does K'derech she'oseh b'shem oviv, as he does with the name of his father. Elo yishana et shmam. Rather, he should refer to others with different names. Afilu la'achar motam, even after their death. So this is very interesting because this actually it is stated in Hilchot Mamrim, and I quote, if his father's or teacher's name resembles the name of others, he should change their name. We find an example of this in the Talmud. Abaye's name was actually Nachmani.
Yeah.
However, since his teacher Rabba's father had the same name, he coined a new name for his disciple. Ella,
yeah.
Yes, please.
I was going to say, Abaye, some say it's like a composite of Avi Yatomim, father of orphans, because Abaye himself was an orphan. There's a few reasons why he called him Abaye, not Nachmani.
Right. And Rambam continues, Lo yiten shalom lo rabo or yachzir lo shalom. A student should not greet his teacher or respond to the latter's greeting. K'derech shenotnim lere'im or lemachzirim zeh lazeh, as it is customary when two friends exchange greetings. Ela shocha lefanov ve'omer lo b'yira v'kavod shalom alecha rabbi. Rather, he should bow before him and say with awe and reverence, peace be upon you, my master. Ve'im notan lo rabo shalom, yachti lo shalom alecha rabbi umori. If his teacher greeted him, the student should respond, peace be upon you, my teacher and master. Halacha 6. V'chein lo yachlot tefilov lifnei rabo. Similarly, he should not remove his tefillin in presence of his teacher. And this is interesting. This was why is the tefillin? Rav David Arameya notes that this law is found in the Shimusha Rabbah. His version of that text leads into the interpretation before rather than in the presence of. For example, the teacher should remove his tefillin and then the students. However, the Shibolei HaLeket and others render the Shimusha Rabbah as translated here. The Kesef Mishnah cites Sanhedrin 101b, which forbids removing one's tefillin in the presence of a king. So they're equating the teacher in the same level as a king. Since Chorayat 13a relates that a Torah scholar is more deserving of honor than a king, there are those who quote this as a source for this halacha. Velo Yosef, and he should not recline in his presence. Elo Yoshev k'Yoshev ifnei HaMelech. Rather, he should sit before him as one sits before a king. Velo Yispalel. Velo lifnei Rabo, velo la'achar Rabo, velo betzad Rabo. A person should not pray either in front of his teacher, behind his teacher, or at his teacher's side. Needless to say, one should not walk by his teacher's side. Rather, he should distance himself behind his teacher without standing directly behind him, and then afterwards he can begin praying. Maimon continues, V'lo yikanes im rabo b'merchatz. One should not enter a bathhouse together with his teacher. V'lo yeshev v'mokom rabo, or sit in his teacher's place. V'lo yechriya devorov v'fonov. One should not side against his teacher's opinions in his presence. V'lo yista es devorov, or contradict his statements. V'lo yeshev lefonov. He should not sit in his presence until his teacher tells him to ad sheyomar lo yishev, until his teacher tells him to sit. V'lo ya'amod milfonov ad sheyomar lo amod, or ad sheitol rishus la'amod. One should not stand before him until he tells him to stand, or until he receives permission to stand. Rambam continues, when one departs from his teacher, lo yachzor lo la'acharov, one should not turn his back on him. Ela nirta la'acharov, or fonov keneged ponov. Rather, one should walk backwards whilst facing him. Halacha 7. V'chayev la'amod mipnei rabo. Mishirenu merachok melo enov. A person is obligated to stand before his teacher. Ad she'it kaseh mimenu v'lo yireh kamoto. And from the time he sees him as far away as he can see, until he passes beyond his field of vision and is hidden, and his figure is no longer visible. And then the student may sit. A person is also obligated to visit his teacher during the festivals, the foot festivals. Halacha 8. En cholkim kavod the Talmud b'fnei Rabbo. Deference or kind of honor should not be shown to a student while in the presence of his teacher. Ela imken derech Rabbo lecholek lo kavod. Unless it is customary for his teacher also to show this particular student's deference. V'chol hamalachot she'aved osel Rabbo Talmud osel Rabbo. All the services which a servant would normally perform for his master should be performed by a student for his teacher. However, if the student was in a place where he was not recognized and was not wearing tefillin, you may ask, why? What does it mean, not wearing tefillin? Apparently at those times the students used to wear their tefillin the whole day, and so perhaps they would be studying together the whole day, and if he's not wearing his tefillin, v'chash shema yomru evedhu, perhaps people would think that the student was his servant. Eno noel lo min olo ve'eno cholzo. He need not put on his teacher's shoe or remove it. These are the practices of a servant. V'lo hamonea talmido milsham sho. Monea memenu chesed or porek mimenu yu'at shamayim. Whoever prevents his student from serving him withholds kindness from him and takes away his fear of heaven. V'chod talmid shemitz lazel deva b'kol kavod rabo. Any student who deals lightly with a matter related to the honor of his teacher, gorem lishchina she'etaltek miYisrael, causes the divine presence to depart from Israel. So that's very stern words from Rambam. But let's remind ourselves of previous teachings in Hilchot Talmud, chapter 5, Mishneh 1. The Rambam writes that a wise man is distinguished not only by his intellectual achievements, but by the manner in which his understanding is reflected in his everyday behavior. When a student has the opportunity to appreciate not only the intellectual gifts of his teacher, but the totality of his behavior, he becomes aware of how a Torah lifestyle is an all-encompassing commitment, affecting every aspect of his daily activity. This leads to complete fear of heaven. So it's not only your intellectual aspirations you should be thinking about, it's how you carry yourself around people. This is the guide is Hilchot Talmud. And we're being reminded of this. Halacha 9. Ra'a Rabbo over al divrei Torah. Omalo lemidatono rabbeinu kach v'kach. A student who saw his teacher transgress the words of the Torah should tell him, and I quote, "Master, you have taught us such and such." Whenever a student mentions a teaching in his teacher's presence, Omalo, Kach lemidano rabbeinu, he should tell him, "You have taught us the following, Master." Al yoma davar shelo shma merabo ad sheyazkir shem omro. He should not mention a concept which he did not hear from his teacher unless he mentions the name of the person who authored this. So let's talk about this. In general, there is an obligation to mention a concept in the name of its author. This we learn in Megillah 15 Amud Aleph. However, in this instance, there is a particular obligation to do so, lest it be assumed that his teacher was authored by one's teacher. This teaching was authored by one's teacher. And Rambam continues, Ukashiyomus Rabbo, and when his teacher dies, Korea kol bigdov ad shehu magle et libo. He has to rend all his garments until he reveals his heart. Be'eno me'achel olam, and he should never mend them. Bamed dvarim amurim, when does this apply? Berabo muvhok shelamad mimenu rov chachmato, to one's outstanding teacher, from one who has gained the majority of his own wisdom. Aval im lo lamad mimenu rov chachmato harezeh talmud chaver. However, a person who has not gained the majority of his wisdom under a teacher's instruction is considered to be both a student and a colleague. Ve'enu chayav bichvado b'chol elu hadvarim, and he is not obligated to honor him in all the above matters. Aval omed bilfanov, nevertheless he should stand before him. We'll learn about this later, when you should stand within a certain amount of cubits when your teacher comes. V'koreh olav, and also at the time of his death must rend his garments. Kishem shehu koreh al kol hamesim shehu mitabel aleihem, as he does for all the other deceased from whom he is obligated to mourn. Even if he learns only one thing from him. Ben katan ben gadol, whether it would be small or great matter. Omen bilfanov v'koreh olav, he should stand before him and rend his garments at the time of his death. So, we learn in Pirkei Avos, chapter 6, Mishneh 3, a person who learns from a colleague a single chapter, a single law, a single verse, or a single letter must show him honor. So this we find concerning King David. He learned from Achitophel only 2 things, yet he called him his teacher, his guide, and his mentor. Halacha 10. V'chol talmid chacham shedo'atov mechvunot. Every student with a proper character, eno medabel mifnei mi shehu gadol mimenu b'chachma, will not speak in front of anyone who is wiser than he is. Afal pi shelo lamad mimenu klum, even though he has not learned anything from him. So where do we learn this from? We learn this also from Pirkei Avos, I think chapter 5, Mishneh 6, that states that there are 7 traits that characterize an underdeveloped person and 7 that characterize a wise person. A wise man does not speak in the presence of anybody who is wiser than he. Halacha 11. Harav hamuvhak sheratzal limchol al kvodo b'chol hadvarim ha'elu or be'echad mehen l'chol talmidov or le'echad mehen arishus biyodo. An outstanding teacher may, if he desires, forgo his honor with regards to any or all of the above matters to any or all of his students. Even though he forgoes his honors, the student is obligated to respect him at the time he forgoes respect. So it's interesting. You think about if a teacher and his pupil have perfect respect according to these laws going on, but then the teacher tells him, you don't have to get up every time I do this, do that. Privately he tells him, what happens, or gives him leniency, what happens if they're in the market? And he's doing what the teacher asked him, not to show the respect, but people look and say, why is he not showing him respect? Therefore, this is why Rambam is saying, even though the teacher may forego these honors, the student is obligated to respect him at the time. Respect him even nevertheless, even though he gives him leniency, he should actually still show honor. Halacha 12. Kishem shetalmidim chayovim b'kavod harav. Just as students are obligated to honor their teacher, Kach harav tzarech lekaved et talmidov ul kravam. A teacher is obligated to honor his students and encourage them. Kach amru chachamim, therefore our sages declared, Yehi chavod talmidcha chaviv alecha keshlach. The honor of your students should be as dear to you as your own. And Rambam continues, "V'tzorich adam lehizhaher b'talmidov ulaha'avam shehem habanim." A teacher should take care of his students and love them because they are like his sons. Hamhanim le'olam hazeh, who bring him pleasure in this world, ve'le'olam haba, and in the worlds to come. Halacha 13. Hatalmidim mosifin chachmat harav u'marchivin libo. Students increase their teacher's wisdom and broaden his horizons. Amru chachamim, harbe chachma lamadati barabaso v'yoter mechavero or talmidai yoter mikulam. Our chachamim have stated, I learned much wisdom from my teachers and even more from my colleagues. However, from my students, I learned most of all. And Rambam concludes, Ukashem she'etz katan madlik et hagadol. Just as a small branch is used to light a large bow, kach talmid katan machadeh harav. So too, a small student sharpens his teacher's thinking processes. Ad sheyotzi mimeno b'shelo tov chachma b'f'ora. Until through his questions, the student's questions, he brings forth brilliant wisdom. So in order to answer a student's questions, a teacher must understand fully the subject he is teaching. You know, the teacher may, if he's studying by himself, be willing to just learn enough to get by or to just understand it enough. But when he knows that he has to face a class full of eager students, he himself wants to penetrate as deeply as possible in order to be able to provide an answer to any question his students may come back with. And that concludes chapter 5 of Hilchot Talmud Torah.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was very fascinating. I mean, we think we know the general laws of respect between rabbi and a student, or even a father and a son, but the Rambam delineates all these extra facets of that relationship, and it's really something that we would not normally know through our own intelligence. But thank you very much for that, Michael. So that's it for this week. In the meantime, have a wonderful and blessed week.